The evil that men do lives after them. The good is oft interred with their bones. Yet for one man this is simply not true. One man's legacy lives on. One man shaped the course of our galaxy with his actions, with his zeal, with his ferocity and his dedication. Not a god, not a primarch, but born of the common stock of humanity. The most superlative warrior our Imperium has ever seen. Unmatched, unbowed and unbroken till the end. Through sacrifice and duty, one man stood head and shoulders above his peers, the fire burning in his breast with a light that outshone all others around him. One warrior's relentlessness that brought death and destruction to countless enemies for over 1,000 years. Even to this day, his legacy continues. His example, his spirit fights on, unending against the tides of darkness. For 10,000 years, our champion's benefaction has been fury, faith, and ferocity to strike against the alien, the mutant, and the heretic. Without this one man, one warrior, his zeal, his conviction, and his legacy, the Imperium would not stand today. No pity, no remorse, no fear. In the age of gods and men, when power was plentiful and skill at arms a given, one man rose to prominence. Not for glory, not for gain, but for service and selflessness. And through his service he has protected us and continues to guard us still. There are none, nor have there been any his equal, though many thought, tested and failed, none come close to a shadow of his righteous might. Described as champion of death himself, there can only be one figure of whom I am talking about. The first High Marshal, the Black Knight, the Emperor's champion, Sigismund. Welcome one and all, I am Azazel, and for better or worse, you have stumbled your way onto my video detailing Sigismund, the Emperor's champion. Perhaps my favourite character in the entire setting. So while I will hardly do his character, his deeds or his triumphs justice, I can only hope to encourage you to read about him yourselves. Be prepared now. Steel your hearts and gird your minds as we enter the most horrific place imaginable. The place where hope goes to die and where thirsting gods rack the souls of billions, while directing madness on the stage of our galaxy as easily as puppeteers pull on strings. Welcome to the 31st millennium. For brevity's sake, we will gloss over the setting entire. Let us skip the usual ramble and pass over the ages of humanity. Colossal expansion of the stars, galaxy-ending warfare, a race driven to its knees by the age of strife, of warp storms and harrying Xenos forces. Let us assume you know all this. The coming of the Emperor, the battle to reclaim Terra from the twisted techno-barbarians and psycho-warlords, the pinnacle of the Emperor's gene crafting, his Primarch project, and the birth of the Legiones Astartes. All of it vital, yes, yet they are not the star of this entry. Our star is that of Sigismund, a star that burned so bright that it blackened his armor with its ferocity. His name translates to protection through victory, and for no other could this be more accurate. Born on Terra, Sigismund was one of many orphans displaced by the fighting. While neither the eldest, nor the largest, nor the strongest, for at this point he was little more than a youth with none of the gene-crafted super strength, skill or reflexes that he would later on receive. Nevertheless, it was in defense of his companions and in vengeance against those who murdered their protector that Sigismund stood tall and fought his enemies with ferocity and determination. This combination served him well, and would remain his fighting philosophy through the centuries that followed. More than this defined him, however. Being born on Terra, witnessing the nightmarish wars that raged around him, and observing the changes that the Emperor and the Imperium wrought, made him a true believer. Not of godhood or divinity, but an unyielding, impenetrable faith in the cause. He fought to protect the Imperium, its citizenry, and to eliminate those who would cause harm to his fellow man. With that, he was inducted into the 7th Legion of the Legiones Astartes, the Imperial Fists. His rise through the ranks came as surprise to none, as all saw his single-mindedness, determination, and dueling skills as signs of future promise. Such promise, in fact, that he would then go on to lead the Templar Brethren. The Templars served as the first company of the Imperial Fists Legion and served as the Primarch Rogal Dorn's bodyguard. To lead the Templars was to prove oneself in a trial of unreasonable proportions. You see, the Templar Brethren of the Imperial Fists were the best of the best. Mighty warriors who had served across the galaxy, faced down nightmarish horrors and Xenos raiders. Heroes that could slap down the vast majority of average Astartes due to their prowess and experience. If one were to lead the Templars, they would have to face down and overcome 200 of their first company brethren in duels, one right after the other. No respite, no rest, no backward steps, just challenge after bloody challenge. The wounds add up, fatigue sets into muscles, joints begin to ache, bones jarring from parrying thousands of transhumanly strong blows, each powerful enough to level buildings. Hence why this challenge is not taken lightly. Not only does it push a claimant to the very edge of their physical limits and reveal how far duty drives them, but it also exposes a candidate's mental bearing. The fatigue of long battles, yes, but also control. For how many, when tired, allow their self-restraint to slip just a little, will perform an action without due amount of care? In friendly duels such as these, with demigods of war armed and armoured in the finest technology, control is crucial. A single mistake could lead to wounding their brothers severely. Defeat your challenger, yes, but never to break, slip, or fumble under pressure. This is the way of the Imperial Fists. And only one capable of such an example can serve as the first captain of their legion. Of course, Sigismund prevailed. Wounded and fatigued, he earned his place as the first captain of the Imperial Fists and as adjutant to his Primarch Rogal Dorn. But this was not the only feat of arms that Sigismund achieved. To demonstrate one's skill within your own legion is no mean accomplishment, but in those days it was common for members of legions to serve periods alongside their brother legions, sharing, comparing, and sharpening their skills against and shoulder to shoulder with those of different combat styles and doctrines. In those glorious days of fraternity, bonds were formed with cousins across the Legiones Astartes, and reputations were carved out in deeds. It was on secondment to the World Eaters, the 12th Legion of the Legiones Astartes, that Sigismund earned his most famous moniker. For in that legion, close quarters combat was a specialty. Blade work and killing blows were the trademark of the legion even before their fall to chaos and the god Khorne. It was in their gladiatorial pits, in whirlwinds of rage and ripostes, that Sigismund earned the respect of the World Eaters. This, from quite possibly the most savage of the legions, stands testament to his skill at arms, and it was from them that Sigismund adopted their tradition of chaining his weapons to his armour, so that he would never be disarmed during combat. Sigismund never lost a duel. The only blemish on an otherwise flawless record came from the hands of Jago Sevatarion, first captain of the 8th Legion, the Night Lords. Sevatar was an exemplary fighter, skilled with a blade and cunning in his strategies, yet he also had more than that. Akin to his Primarch, Konrad Curze, he was blessed with the gift of foresight. In battle, he could see the moves of his opponents before they attacked, perhaps even before his foes even thought about it as well. Imagine facing down an enemy who knew your every strike before you attacked. How long would you last? A few seconds? Perhaps half a minute if they decided to toy with you first. The duel between Sigismund and Sevatar lasted for hours. So skilled, so rapid, so temerarious was Sigismund that despite the clear advantage, Sevatar could not defeat him. Each blow and counterblow was economic in movement, stoic in defense, and aggressive in attack, that even with a handicap the duel lasted far beyond what it should have. Frustrated with his inability to end the duel with a clean blow, Sevatar committed an illegal move. a headbutt, just to bring an end to the engagement. While Sevatar was disqualified and the bout rendered null and void, it was an act of desperation on his part, as Sigismund, after hours of fighting, had created an opening to strike the winning blow. He left the fight with final words. "Next time, brother, remember that even if people start out with honor, no one ends that way." If nothing else, this duel served as an inspiration to Sigismund, not for skill at arms, nor for patience, nor for tenacity, but as a firm reminder of his resolve to never serve with less than absolute honor. But enough about his martial skill, there are battles aplenty to come. Let us look at his relationship with his Primarch, Rogal Dorn. While Sigismund was Terran-born, hailing from the homeworld of humanity, Rogal Dorn had been raised among the ice hives and tribes of Inuit. Their cold stoicism was inherited from the frigid wastes of their home planet, tidally locked around a dying star. His reunion with the Imperium did little to thaw his frosty nature. That is not to say he was not dedicated to the Imperium. In fact, he was one of its staunchest supporters. Rogal Dorn was loyal to his core. Duty and vigilance were carved into the bedrock of his very soul. His unyielding nature and implacable determination defined him as ice-cold fury, an effigy of the Imperium's ideals that would not waver, no matter the trials. Sigismund, on the other hand, was markedly different. Though he shared the same drive, loyalty, and strength of will that his father exuded, he was fire and fury. He was the roaring tempest that would annihilate his foes by overwhelming force. His nature was something that Rogal Dorn would come to value highly, and in turn, Sigismund would sacrifice everything for duty to his father and his Imperium. So great in skill was Sigismund, and so unalike from Rogal Dorn, that Sanguinius, arguably the greatest of his brothers and Primarch of the Blood Angels, masters of close quarters combat, stated that Sigismund was less my brother Dorn's champion, and more Death's himself. Nevertheless, the bond remained between First Captain and Primarch. Sigismund valued nothing higher than Rogal Dorn's approval, not knowing that it would be something he would have to sacrifice in the years to come. Perfidy, fratricide, faithlessness, and horror. The disloyalty and peril of this time smothered the stars in a blanket of doubt and calamity. Atrocities, sprung from those once considered allies, turned the galaxy on its head. Atrocities, sprung from those once considered allies, turned the galaxy on its head. It was the end of the Imperium as we know it, and the death of enlightenment. For Sigismund, the heresy was a monstrosity, but indefatigable in mind, body, and spirit, he faced more than any of his brothers. He spilled more traitor blood than any other, faced betrayal from those he considered brothers, and even sacrificed what he valued most, the approval of his father, Rogal Dorn. It was by happenstance, or fate, that Dorn and the Imperial Fists came upon the frigate Eisenstein, that had narrowly escaped the treachery at Istvan. In that moment, Horus's treachery was revealed. Rogal Dorn's own brother, a being that Rogal had admired, bonded with, and even looked up to, had betrayed them. Retreating in solitude, Rogal Dorn formulated his plans to return to fortify Terra, while sending a retribution fleet to rain death and destruction on his traitorous brothers. Sigismund, on the other hand, was met by Euphrates Keeler, a remembrancer formerly attached to the expeditionary fleet of the War Master Horus. She was a convert to the imperial cult, followers of the Lectitio Divinitatis, a holy book professing that the emperor was not a man as he claimed to be, but a god. Eventually, she would be considered a saint for her ability to channel faith in the god Emperor, banish demons, and otherwise see his work completed. It was this woman who claimed that Sigismund would face a choice: either die under the light of an unknown star, alone and unremembered, or choose war without end, and in doing so know that his father would need him before the culmination of his life. Now, in the Imperium as it was, the imperial truth was the foundation of its enlightenment. There were no gods, no superstitions, and no divine powers. There was only science, knowledge, and things not yet understood. Faith of all kinds was outlawed and prohibited. Rogal Dorn especially was a stringent believer in the imperial truth, as were many of his sons. Yet Sigismund was rocked to his core. This man who had faced trials, tribulations, and battles against thousands of enemies, one warrior who knew no fear and had achieved victory on battlefields against insurmountable odds, doubted. By all rights, he should have dismissed her as a charlatan, the deluded ramblings of a foolish and mentally handicapped individual. Yet he was struck to his core. It was not a psyker's power, nor any warp presence that tainted his mind. Yet something took root within Sigismund. Something as of yet undefinable. Nascent, but as unrelenting as his fury and tenacity in battle. With this said, when his father ordered him to take command of the Retribution fleet and seek out the traitors, Sigismund refused. He refused. His own father, the one to whom he owed complete and utter loyalty, he pleaded to remain by Rogal's side, although he kept his reasoning to himself. Rogal, perplexed, agreed to his son's wishes, and command of the Retribution fleet was passed to another. Once more upon the soil of his homeworld, Terra, the birthplace of humanity and the Imperium, works were in place. Fortifications were raised up, facades torn down to make place for gun emplacements, and strategies were being formulated and executed. Only one problem. Mars had turned traitor. Not the entirety of the Mechanicum, but the fabricated General Kelbor Hal and a large faction had turned their efforts to the support of the nefarious War Master. With the forges from Mars supplying Terra with key equipment and essential supplies, Sigismund was ordered to undertake a mission. Land on the Red Planet and gather what supplies are available to prepare for the inevitable invasion of the Sol system. He refused. An Astartes and a son of Rogal Dorn to boot refused his Primarch. The most loyal, steadfast first captain anyone could ask for said no. In a time when betrayal by those once considered brothers was an all too agonizing wound, for his son to refuse an order was nothing less than appalling. In a graveling tone, Rogal demanded to know why. Already racked with guilt for failing to lead the Retribution fleet, Sigismund told his father everything, of Euphrates Keeler, of her prophecy, and the choices he had made. He knew what this would entail. He understood his Primarch better than the rest of his chapter, and perhaps even than many of the Primarchs. He knew that Rogal Dorn held firm to the Imperial truth, that gods were a lie and religion and superstition were foolishness and ignorance brandished about by primitives and dullards. Sigismund knew he would shame himself in his father's eyes. For an Astartes, this is nothing less than utter humiliation. For a Space Marine, honor is everything. Martial valor, pride in the Legion, and the love of their gene fathers, the Primarchs, there is nothing which they hold in greater value. Yet Sigismund told the truth, knowing that his shame would be far less than lying to the one being whom he revered with all his heart, Rogal Dorn. And what would his Primarch do? Would he chastise his son for being foolish? A reprimand followed by inspirational words that put at rest his qualms and fears? A lecture on the nature of the universe? Each of these would require compassion, and compassion can only come from a heart as whole as the day it was made. Yet Rogal's heart was as icy as the planet on which he landed. It was first broken when Horus Lupercal, his elder brother and in many ways his own idol, turned his back on the Imperium and turned traitor. Its energy sapped as he realized that yet more of his brothers betrayed him. Finally, it froze over, knowing that on his shoulders was borne the burden of the Loyalist defense, that the traitor's cause would succeed or fail on his stratagems, plans and maneuvering, that in his hands lay the survival or downfall of humanity. His son, believing the ramblings of a deranged fanatic and refusing his orders, found no purchase in his heart. "I am not your father. You are not my son. And no matter what your future holds, you never will be." Sigismund would not be removed from his captaincy, for fear of the damage it would do to morale, yet it wounded Sigismund. The words of his Primarch cut deeper than any sword could reach. Dorn's lecture on duty and responsibility weighed heavily on Sigismund's mind, and he acceded to his Primarch's wishes. He launched himself to Mars, retrieving the equipment and supplies for the siege, and with his fellow captains he fought the solar war as the traitors finally arrived in the system. It was with Sigismund that the Loyalists brought the traitors into a trap, luring them around Pluto in a feigned retreat before blowing up the planet, massacring hundreds of ships, only to double back on themselves and make the traitors bleed. It was in this engagement that Sigismund fought Horus Aximund, a champion of the Sons of Horus. Sigismund wounded Aximund almost unto death but was teleported away before he could strike the killing blow. During the retreat back to Terra, he spoke with Boreas, his first lieutenant, for Boreas had saved Sigismund's life during his duel with Aximund. In return, Boreas was savagely wounded and lay dying in the Apothecarium. In his final moments, Sigismund confessed everything that he had done, including why he had desired to die during the fight with Aximund. Boreas spoke to him.
"Death is not an atonement. You atone by living until the last blow of the sword."
Sigismund had many defining moments, ones that have echoed down the ages both through him and his Templar legacy. Yet for me, this one line reforged Sigismund into the weapon he would become. He was a savage fighter indeed, canny and quick. His dedication to the death of his enemies was all-consuming. Yet he became more than just the first Templar in this moment. In this promise, he became a living weapon, the sword of the Emperor, his judgment to the guilty, his retribution to the false. He would live so that he may bring death. Back on Terra, the siege began in earnest, and Sigismund set to work. His bloody prowess carved away ranks of the traitor formations. He annihilated all those he faced. Through determination and fortitude, he served his legion, his Primarch, his Emperor with righteous wrath. He faced Khan in those terrible days, his former brother of the fighting pits, first captain of the World Eaters, and would have struck him down had Khan not been fueled by the power of Khorne. He even attempted to fight a Primarch one-on-one. Sigismund attacked Fulgrim, an ascended Fulgrim, brimming with the power of Slaanesh. Sigismund knew it was impossible, knew that it would cost him his life, and yet he threw himself at the enemies of mankind with a fervor unmatched. Both times would have seen him dead, and both times Rogal Dorn came to his son's aid. The father who had renounced his son, the Primarch whose broken heart had eliminated the care he had shared for Sigismund, launched into battle not once, but twice to save his valiant son. Rogal Dorn was stubborn in many ways. In loving his sons, he remained equally stubborn. Disappointed in Sigismund's actions he may have been, yet through his own deeds he demonstrated the love care, and esteem with which he held his greatest son. It was on Terra, when doom shrouded the galaxy, when abominations of warp-twisted former brethren threatened the palace itself, that Sigismund's fate was written. His mettle was proven, his will indomitable, his prowess unmatched. Yet what is a warrior without a sword? Not just any sword, but the sword. A sword that would echo through the ages, one of prophecy and fate destined for one man's hand. The one who stands because someone must. For a single warrior of discipline and determination to stand against evil when all odds are stacked against them. Sigismund was gifted the black sword from the Emperor himself. It would be Sigismund who led the defense of Terra while the Emperor and his Primarchs boarded the vengeful spirit and attempted to destroy Horus. To Sigismund would fall the responsibility of hunting down the champions of evil. Wherever their twisted countenance reared, Sigismund would be there. When the ranks of abominations stepped aside to let a torchbearer of the ruinous powers forward, Sigismund would strike first and strike hard. To cut off the head of the snake is to kill the serpent, and as the Emperor's champion, Sigismund would do just that. Again, and again, and again. There is no telling how many vainglorious and gifted traitors fell those days. How many potential warlords fell beneath his blade and bolter in his defense. Even his old friend Khan, renewed by the blessings of the blood god, was carved down by the Black Knight and his black sword. If you wish to know why the Imperial Palace still stands, look to Sigismund. Horus was defeated. The traitor legions in disarray fled the Sol system. The Emperor lay on the brink of death, only to be interred on the Golden Throne, where he remains unto this day. The Loyalists hounded the traitor legions across the galaxy, penning them up inside the Eye of Terror. During these dark days, the legions were broken apart, chiseled into chapters of no more than 1,000 Marines, lest anyone with power to rival Horus should be seduced by thoughts of treachery. Sigismund was named chapter master of the most devout and determined of the Imperial Fist's legion, and under his command they renamed themselves the Black Templars. Sigismund at this point had come full circle, back to his birth planet. He had slain countless enemies, had parts of his soul destroyed, and reforged himself anew in the ashes of the heresy. He swore an oath that would rain fire and fury through 10 millennia. Sigismund would lead the Black Templars on an eternal crusade, one that would never end, only endure. It would be he and his chapter that would never cease to prosecute the enemies of the Imperium. They would fight, win, and move on. No pity, no remorse, no fear. They would be the bane of the arch-enemy, the nightmare of the heretic, the destroyers of the damned. The sons of Guilliman are praised as saviors of the Imperium. Their numbers are vast, their systems kept safe, and billions recognize them as the Emperor's angels. Yet this is half of the truth. How easy is it to man the walls when others fight and die in your place? How privileged it must be to face the enemy only on your own terms. I believe that the Imperium stands today thanks to the Black Templars and Sigismund. It is they who attack the forces of chaos in their strongholds. They who blunt the blades aimed at our Imperium's core, and they who strike fear into the hearts of the traitor, the witch, and the heretic. It was Sigismund himself who took the brunt of Abaddon's first Black Crusade. Sigismund, the High Marshal of the Black Templars, that stopped it in its tracks before it began carving its way through the Imperium. It was there that Sigismund came to his end, outnumbered and outgunned. Boarded by Abaddon and the Black Legion, Sigismund met his end with honor, to the very last. The ancient Templar king. Behind him, a throne of carved bronze, and around him a raging halo born by his faith, fury, and pride. A life lived not for living, but of a refusal to die, and a fathomless hatred that would not let him leave his duty unfinished.
So you have returned. I never doubted you would. I see time has blackened your armor as it has ours. I looked for you. As Terra burned in the fires of your father's heresy, I hunted for you. Day and night. Always lesser men blocked my way. Always they died so that you might live. I have never stopped searching for you, Ezekiel. Not through all these long years. Don't make me do this. Don't make me kill you. You cannot have lived all of these centuries and seen nothing of the truth, Sigismund. The Imperium is ours. We fought for it. We built it with blood and sweat and wrath. We forged it with the world we took. The Empire is built upon the foundations of our brothers' bones. You lost the right to speak for the Imperium when you brought it to its knees. If you loved it as ardently as you claim, Ezekiel, you would not have pushed it to the brink of ruin. We are the Emperor's angels. We didn't rebel out of petty spite, Sigismund. We rebelled because our Lord and Master played us false. We were useful tools to bring the galaxy to heel, but he would have cleansed us from the Imperium the way he purged the Thunder Legion before us, wiping us all from history like excrement from his golden boots. I am sure some of you are convinced you fell from grace for those pure, virtuous ideals. You have had many centuries within your prison to repeat those claims to yourself, but they change nothing. You keep speaking, Ezekiel. Do I look as though I am listening?
Sigismund cared not for whys nor wherefores, would not lecture on pride or duty, gave no regard to their motives or passions. Treachery was a stain as black as ink, a permanent mark, never to be redeemed, only to be punished by death. 9 members of Sigismund's sword brethren stood around the room in a silent guard, with almost 40 of the Black Legion elite. Each Astartes understood that this was a personal affair, a duel for the ages, the end of an era in one way or another. These 2 legends faced each other. Abaddon, never the equal to Sigismund when it came to swordsmanship, stood taller than his opponent in his Terminator warplate. He wielded the Talon of Horus in one hand, a vicious, oversized claw that radiated death from its presence. Sigismund fought with his black sword, the relic that had slaughtered thousands of heretics since the day it was first bestowed into his hands. Yet time was the great enemy. For those in the Eye of Terra, time had passed slowly. Abaddon was still in his prime, a formidable fighter and armed to the teeth with the best war gear. For Sigismund, it had been over 1,000 years, an entire millennia spent crusading across the galaxy, battle after battle, siege after siege, all to uproot the dark tendrils of mankind's enemies. He was old. Far from frail, far from beaten, what ailed him in old age had robbed him of his superfluous speed. He was now as slow as a regular Astartes. Yet an Astartes is still a transhuman killing machine. Neither had his fury ebbed, it had only grown. It gave him the fortitude to match Abaddon's Terminator armor-enhanced strength. Sigismund wasted no time parrying or blocking. He burst forth with hack after hack, slice after slice, no rest, no respite, no mercy. He would attack and only block Abaddon's ripostes with a backswing that led him into his next murderous blow. Yet fatigue took its toll on humanity's greatest hero. Moment by moment, his attack slowed. By nanoseconds each time, yet again and again his arms began to falter. his fighting style became more conservative. And for the first time in 1,000 years, Sigismund took a step back. The first sign of weakness. A moment of triumph for Abaddon, who had not faced an opponent this trying in all his years of exile. Abaddon pushed him back, blow by blow, strike by strike, until an opening emerged. Abaddon did not hesitate, did not question the opportunity, but rammed the Talon of Horus straight through Sigismund's midriff, near tearing him in twain. It wasn't until Abaddon's satisfaction faded that he saw the black sword sheathed within his own chest. A crippling blow, even for an Astartes. Sigismund, even at the moment of his death, yearned to continue the fight, to slay the enemies of his emperor, his imperium. Trembling hands grasped for the sword, still stuck fast within Abaddon's chest.
No. It's over. Sleep now in the failure that you have earned. Sigismund, this claw has killed 2 Primarchs. It wounded the Emperor unto death. I would have spared it the taste of your life as well. If only you could have seen what I have seen.
Sigismund, his ancient body succumbing to the wounds that had shredded his torso, spoke his last words. Blood bubbled from his mouth as he spat out each one, pronouncing them with all the intensity of a doom-laden curse.
You will die as your weakling father died. Soulless, honorless, weeping, ashamed.
Sigismund had one last duty to perform, unknowingly and resentfully, but he made it nonetheless. For in those days the Imperium was at a state of relative peace. The dark days of the Horus heresy were far behind them. Xenos incursions were a mere irritant compared to the bloody civil war that humanity had endured. For the complacent bigots in power on Terra, the traitor legions were a forgotten menace. They had been driven from real space, banished to the Eye of Terra, and presumed dead. Abaddon had changed all that. With his first Black Crusade, he had shot out of the Eye of Terra at the head of an armada. If he had struck the Imperium without warning, without any sort of alarm, then he could have wreaked untold damage. The Imperial machine is sluggish to react at the best of times. Sigismund never gave in to the hubris of the aristocracy. He never believed that the traitor legions were gone, never to return, not even for a second. He was there, waiting for them. He wounded Abaddon so severely that the Black Legion was forced to scatter, to abandon their unified front and disperse among Imperial worlds as flocks of raiders and pirates. He blunted their attack before it even began. In order to salvage some honor from this close victory, and even intimidate the Imperium that had forgotten them, Abaddon and the Black Legion returned Sigismund's body to Terra, who was sent back to the homeworld of his origin that he had defended so fiercely, clutching the Black Sword. The Emperor's champion was coming home. In his hands lay the weapon that struck fear into the hearts of the traitor legions. But this time it bore an inscription. 3 words to strike fear into the heart of the Imperium, to remind them of the enemies that still burned with a hatred so fierce that it would drown the very stars and annihilate worlds. 3 words that would see wave after wave of sectors drown in traitors, break the unbreakable gate, and let chaos cut a path through the galaxy. Just 3 words. We are returned. Thank you for sticking with me this long. I hope you enjoyed my attempt at an homage to my favourite character within the setting. However, I think it is clear that no entry on this formidable legend will ever do him justice. Therefore, I highly recommend reading more about him, especially his death in The Black Legion and the Talon of Horus by Aaron Dembski Bowden. Let's be honest, I can't think of a single character with better lines when he's faced with his own death. The passage gives me chills every time I read it. With that said, please feel free to like, subscribe, comment something, anything you wish me to touch upon more in the future. Your input is welcomed, as, well, without you, no one would be listening. Anywho, enjoy your day or night, and I hope you've indulged in some escapism from reality. For that's why we are here, isn't it? Until next time,